Welcome to the 5th Change Control webinar. We're covering CR53 today. We have Ian presenting on an ISD change. I've just popped a link to the change control page of the collaboration base into the chat, just because Ian suggested that it might be helpful to have the change request open whilst the webinar goes on. We obviously have the text on the slides as usual. If you'd like to read CR53 kind of alongside the call, please feel free to do so. As usual, we have, I'll skip onto the agenda. Oops. We have the presentation, and then we will move into a Slido Q&A. Hannah, I hope, will share the Q&A in the chat in a second. If you could please keep all questions to the Q&A rather than coming off mute, it just helps us to control the discussion and make sure we can share a Q&A document after the presentation as well. So I will hand over to Ian for the presentation of CR53, which is an ISD Publication Frequency Change.
Thanks very much, Jimmy. Morning, everyone. So I'm Ian Smith. I'm the migration lead on the programme, and actually I suspect probably my preamble into the sort of genesis of this change is probably going to be considerably longer than the description of the change itself. So there's been a piece of work undertaken where the programme and colleagues in Elexon have been examining the end-to-end journey for service activation, onboarding, post qualification testing. So we've been looking at the end-to-end journey for that process, and particularly having a look at some of the timing. So from a migration perspective, one of the risks that we're trying to mitigate is any potential delay that may occur from a party qualifying and to the point at which they actually want to start migration. So we've been looking at the process, and one of the elements that we teased out in these joint conversations was that currently the publication of ISD being monthly in the transition period, there are circumstances where the cadence of meetings could lead to sort of an unfortunate kind of confluence of events where we find ourselves with parties probably finishing their qualification testing but missing the publication date for ISD, and we're sat around and they're sat on the bench for a while waiting for that process to conclude before service activation completes and they can actually start migrating. So one of the outcomes from these joint sessions was we felt that during the transition period, it would be more appropriate for the ISD publication frequency to be more frequent than monthly during that period to speed up the process of parties getting on the pitch from a migration perspective. So, but fundamentally, there exists a requirement for ISD to be published monthly, and in essence, the change itself is just to change that for during the transition period from monthly to fortnightly. So fundamentally, that will incorporate the ability to add participants as they qualify, and we'll issue the list of ISD entities that covers as part of the Q&A. There is obviously a linkage between MDD and ISD during this period, and one of the challenges that was discussed in the meeting was, is there actually a requirement to perfectly align the issue of MDD alongside the ISD frequency? And when we delved into that in some more detail, the principal requirement that we need to deal with is those incoming MHHS parties being enabled in MDD to support reverse migration. Now, we on further discussion of that, we believe there's a solution there where, and this probably is entering into the realm of consequential change, however, but the proposal that we have is that with regard to the MDD population of MHHS parties, we could pre-populate those on a monthly basis, on the basis that we will understand the qualification pipeline, we'll understand who's likely to be entering the market within the forward view of a month, and therefore we can pre-populate them into MDD ahead of them actually being in ISD, so that we're not placing an onerous requirement on more frequent consumption of MDD. So we feel that, again, quite a lot of conversations around this, and we feel that the risk around that, that is not problematic in the sense that if these parties are present in MDD data, then they can have no impact until they're activated on the DIP anyway, which will be part of the formal qualification and activation process anyway. So we don't see any risk attached to that. So in essence, just to summarise, and I said that probably the preamble would be more significant than the actual requirement itself. It is in essence we're seeking to increase the frequency during the migration period of ISD publication from monthly to every fortnight. So I'll probably pause at that point for questions, I think, in me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian, for that really clear explanation. I'll just a final note on process before we move into the Q&A is that as long as this kind of sails through the Q&A, we'll issue it out for impact assessment tomorrow. That will go for the usual 10 days. We'll collate responses, which will go to the change board, who will make a recommendation for an approval or rejection at the next PSG. So moving into the Q&A, Hannah, if you could just let us know if or when we have any questions, please.
We haven't got anything just yet, but just a reminder to use the hashtag in the chat if you have any questions.
Yeah, apologies. The hashtag on the slide is out of date. So if you just add CR053 onto the end of that, it'll take you to the right place. As usual, the Slido will remain open until 5 p.m. today, if anything pops up later on as well.
We have a question from Karen. Can we confirm what entities we are expecting this change request to cover, and that we would be looking for this frequency to remain for enduring?
So the entities that we are particularly interested in terms of the additional frequency are 1, 45, 61, and M16, which I'll document in the that will go out, one assumes, in the formal responses to the questions. But those are the entities. So
great, thank you. We also have a question from Neil Medley. Will there be a subsequent change request to move back to monthly frequency? And if so, what is the expected timescale for that?
So the requirement, I'll absolutely double check this in the responses, but the requirement that we're seeking to change is the transitional requirement. So I think that sunsets at the end of, I believe, at the end of transition anyway. So I believe that will sunset at M15 anyway. We're not seeking to change the enduring requirements itself, but just the one that is in effect during transition.
Great, thank you. We haven't got anything else just yet.
Thanks, Hannah. We'll give it one more minute, and otherwise we can let any questions come in throughout the day. Brilliant. Okay, let's wrap up there. We will issue the Q&A tomorrow once it's closed at 5 p.m. with confirmed responses from Ian. Following that, we will issue the change request out for impact assessment. Thanks very much for joining.